Revenge with Karen.
The last time I saw Mr. Aldridge alive, he handed me a paperclip and said, "Never underestimate what holds the machine together." Then he walked into the boardroom and died 15 minutes later from a stroke so sudden, his watch kept ticking long after his pulse didn't. They didn't even call me. I found out from a Slack notification that the weekly ops sync was canceled. Man who built a $480 million operation out of 2 garages and a second mortgage died in a chair. And within 24 hours, his son-in-law, my own husband, Thomas, was emailing board members using words like continuity and transition planning. I wasn't included. Not in the emails, not in the planning, not even in the grief. At his memorial, Thomas stood next to his mother like some polished campaign duo, shaking hands and whispering with investors while I sat behind a ficus, watching my own career be surgically erased in real time. I had been Mr. Aldridge's strategist for 11 years. Quietly, invisibly, the gears behind the growth. When his back gave out during a supply chain crisis, I built the model that saved our margins. When the CTO tried to force layoffs in 2020, I rewired operations so no one got cut. Called me his North Star. Never publicly, of course. Visibility was for founders and faces, not the machinery that made it all work. So when Thomas came home 2 days after the funeral and placed an envelope on the kitchen island like he was serving divorce papers, I didn't even flinch. "It's not a demotion," he said, hands on hips like some HR puppet. "The board just thinks you could use a sabbatical, time to rest, reflect, reconnect." Reconnect with what? I asked, staring at the untouched lasagna his mother sent over, still sealed in the tin. "Yourself," he smiled like he was doing me a favor. That was the moment I knew something was rotting behind the curtain. Mr. Aldridge was barely in the ground, and my calendar was already wiped clean. My company email returned auto-replies I didn't write. I checked my ID badge, still active for now. But the writing was on the wall, and in the system logs. Day later, Linda, my mother-in-law, retired CFO and full-time scorpion in a pantsuit, called me from the founder's office phone, sipping something fizzy. "Jennifer, darling," she purred, "you built such a beautiful engine. Now let the next generation drive." I didn't respond, just listened, memorized the smug. Now's a good time to mention, if you're still with me, that 95% of folks never hit the subscribe button. We tell these stories like clockwork, rain or shine, and hitting that like or sub, it's the closest thing we get to a raise. So if you're nodding along, maybe toss us that digital high five. Back to the circus. By the end of the week, I was officially on wellness leave. Thomas scheduled a couples massage. I scheduled a meeting with my lawyer, because Mr. Aldridge may not have trusted me with the spotlight, but he trusted me with something better. His personal file folder. The one locked in a drawer behind his desk. Tucked inside that folder, still sealed and initialed, was a thick white envelope marked continuity plan, activate only if necessary. I slipped it into my handbag the night of the memorial. No one noticed. While they toasted to new beginnings at the country club, I was reviewing board structures, control clauses, and signatures that hadn't seen daylight in years. Because here's the thing about being invisible, they forget you know everything. Every login, every vendor, every kill switch. They think power is a title. I knew better. Power is leverage and patience, and mine had just run out. It started with a ping. One morning, I opened my laptop to check in on the warehouse rollout schedule, something I'd built over 6 months of agony and automation, and was greeted with the cheery red message, "Access denied. Please contact your administrator." I thought maybe the VPN hiccuped. But then my calendar disappeared, followed by every document I'd ever created. 10 years of strategic planning wiped out like I'd never existed. When I called Thomas, he answered like he was already annoyed. "Babe," he exhaled, dragging the word like gum. "It's not a big deal. The board just wants to streamline. You're still technically on sabbatical, remember?" "Streamline," I said, already pacing. "You locked me out of the entire system. That's not a spa day, that's an erasure." Let out that little fake laugh I used to find charming. "God, Jen, you always go to DEFCON 1. Maybe if you didn't act like every change was an attack." I stopped pacing. Stared out the window at the empty lawn, the birdbath he promised to fix 3 springs ago. "You said the board made this decision. Who exactly was in that room?" I asked. "Don't be like that," he snapped. "They still appreciate your contributions, but we're evolving now." New energy, leadership style. "New leadership," I echoed. "You mean your mother?" He didn't answer, but I heard the silence twitch. Heard the clink of her glass in the background. By the time he hung up, I had one hand on a yellow legal pad and the other scrolling through LinkedIn to see who'd been promoted. 4 of my direct reports had already changed their titles. Not one of them called me. I didn't scream. I didn't call HR. I started a list. 9:42 a.m. Locked out of all internal platforms. 10:17 a.m. Operations director, my role, updated to TBD on website. 11:30 a.m. Linda spotted in the founder's office on internal Zoom call. 1:03 p.m. Thomas posts excited for new chapter. With a champagne emoji, 1:45 p.m. Wellness package from HR arrives with a stress ball and lavender candle. At 2:12 p.m., Linda called. Jennifer, she said with that brittle sugar in her voice. Don't take it so personally. You built the engine, dear. We'll take it from here. It took everything in me not to ask if she needed a manual first. I waited until nightfall to take the envelope out of the lockbox under my bed. The one marked continuity plan, activate only if necessary. My hands were steady. That surprised me. Betrayal used to rattle me. Now it just clarified the air. The envelope was thick, seal unbroken. The founder's initials in ink that hadn't faded. I didn't open it, not yet. I wasn't ready to know what was inside, not until I understood what I was up against. The next morning, I parked 2 blocks from Hensley, Marks & Reed, the founder's personal legal firm. I wore jeans, a ball cap, and sunglasses like a mom on her way to spin class. No one noticed me walk in. The receptionist smiled. Do you have an appointment? Not exactly, I said, but Mr. Aldridge told me if I ever had questions, I could speak with Mr. Hensley directly. She hesitated for half a second before pressing a button. 1 moment, please. 10 minutes later, I was in a room with walnut paneling and thick silence. Mr. Hensley walked in with a face like granite and a voice like bourbon. Jennifer, he said, nodding to the envelope I held. He said you might come. I handed it over without a word. He didn't open it either, just placed it inside a fireproof lockbox and pressed his palm against a scanner. That's all for now, he said. But if what's written in here is triggered, you'll hear from me immediately. I left through the back exit. Back home, Thomas had lit candles and queued up a self-help podcast about emotional agility. He tried to massage my shoulders like we were still us. I let him, for 5 minutes. Then I excused myself, saying the lavender candle gave me a headache. I locked the bathroom door, sat on the floor, and started another list. Because I wasn't just cataloging betrayal anymore. I was drawing a map, and I had just found the first weapon. The week after I handed over the sealed envelope felt like a funeral where I was the ghost. No one said I was fired. No one dared. But I wasn't on the leadership calendar anymore. My standing Friday check-in with logistics, gone. My input on the Q4 contingency matrix, reassigned, according to the shared drive, to a junior analyst I once walked through her first budget approval while she cried over a breakup. I emailed her. No reply, I called. Straight to voicemail. By Wednesday, even my old mentor, the HR director who once called me her ethical compass, had stopped returning texts. When I ran into her in the parking lot, she acted like I was a specter, heard something about compliance gray zones, and scuttled off like I was contagious. That night, I opened Slack just to confirm what I already knew. I was no longer in the exec ops braintrust group, the one I created, the one where we solved half the company's messes at midnight. Gone, like I'd never existed, like I was a system error they were quietly patching over. And still, Thomas had the gall to come home every night and ask if I was enjoying the space. On Thursday, he walked in whistling, tossed his keys into the founder's old ceramic bowl, the one Jennifer gave him as a gag gift years ago, when Mr. Aldridge told him, "You're not a visionary, but you've got nice shoes." Big night, he grinned, hosting the team at the house. Mixer vibes, legacy meets the future. I blinked. Our house? He laughed. No, babe, Dad's house. Thought it'd be symbolic. I nodded. Who's on the guest list? He kissed my cheek. Just the core. Wouldn't really know them anymore. It wasn't even the knife twist that hurt. It was the condescension. Like he truly believed I was some outdated firmware, quietly deprecated while the shiny new update took over. After he left for prep, I sat in the kitchen. Just sat. No wine, no sad music. Just the hum of the fridge and the thought, they think I'm too polite to fight. So I did what any ghost would do. I visited the living. Mr. Aldridge's old assistant, Erlyn, had retired after his death officially. But unofficially, she still held the keys to everything. Habits, codes, hotel aliases, his favorite bourbon, and more importantly, secrets. She agreed to meet me at the old bakery down on Dunbar. I ordered her usual. She didn't say thank you. She just took one look at my face and said, "I told him they'd come for you." I stayed quiet. He always said if the company ever turned inward like a snake eating its tail, it'd be his own blood doing the chewing. She sipped her coffee. "But he made sure you'd be fine." "Fine how?" I asked. She smiled. "Not for me to say, but you'll know when it's time." Cryptic, maddening, classic Carolyn. As I stood to leave, she pulled a napkin from her purse and pressed it into my hand. On it was a name, a time, a room number at the firm. Monday, she said, show up 5 minutes early. And don't wear black. He hated black. That night, I watched the photos roll in from the cocktail mixer. Thomas, posing with Linda, and a few finance sharks who once tried to sue the founder over a warehouse lease. Toasts raised in front of the old grandfather clock. Champagne spilled on rugs that saw more integrity than the people standing on them. No one noticed the absence of the woman who'd restructured their entire vendor pipeline in 2021, personally negotiated emergency shipping deals when COVID shut down half the fleet. who held the founder's hand when he coded his legacy clause into the operational bylaws and whispered, "They'll come for me first." They didn't see me anymore, but the will did. And now the timing was lining up like a storm track. Because while they were polishing glasses and practicing investor grins, I was syncing calendars. Monday morning, 9:00 a.m. Boardroom vote on new ownership alignment. Monday morning, 8:00 a.m. Jennifer Hale, private legal appointment. Conference room C, Hensley, Marks, and Reed. Storms coming, and I would not be wearing black. Friday morning, I walked into the office lobby for the first time since my wellness leave began. Not to work, my badge no longer lit green at the gate. I just wanted to see if the walls would remember me. They didn't. The receptionist, new hire named Kara, who once nervously asked me how to schedule a department-wide calendar invite, blinked like she was seeing a ghost. Can I help you?" "I'm just waiting for someone," I said, nodding toward the founder's wall, a self-congratulatory glass panel etched with names of executives past. My name wasn't there. Never had been. But it should have been right under Aldridge's. Before she could stammer out a reply, the elevator dinged, and stepped out in a Navy power suit that probably cost more than my entire bonus history. She was mid-laugh, flanked by 2 West Coast investors and the company's new general counsel. Finally, she was saying, "We've regained control." Jennifer was never leadership material. Aldridge was brilliant, but blind. She was always just detail support. She clocked me mid-sentence. Didn't flinch. Just raised her chin like I was a water stain on the marble. Didn't blink. The investors looked at me curiously, probably wondering who the woman in slacks and a trench coat was. I let them. Ghosts don't explain themselves. By afternoon, my phone buzzed with a forwarded calendar link from someone in accounting, an invite-only leadership transition dinner at a swanky rooftop steakhouse. Saturday night. RSVP closed. My name not on the list. That night, Thomas came home flushed with ego and 2 glasses of wine. He tossed the iPad onto the couch, went to the kitchen to reheat Thai food, and started humming some god-awful acoustic cover of a song we both used to hate. I picked up the iPad. I wasn't snooping. I was confirming what I already knew in my bones. He'd left a draft email open. Subject line, Operational Ownership Redistribution Proposal. The attached document made my stomach drop. It was a memo outlining plans to divide my personal equity among active stakeholders to incentivize long-term alignment. The language was careful, lawyer-crafted, but the intent was clear. Linda would get a bump, Thomas too. Even a junior executive I once pulled from the brink of being fired got a slice. Me, I wasn't even listed. There was a post-it at the top of the file. Thomas's handwriting. Still need legal to confirm clause in will doesn't cover wellness leave as removal. I didn't throw the iPad. I didn't scream. I took a walk. 15 minutes later, I was parked in the empty lot behind the Hensley building, staring at my reflection in the dark glass of the front doors. I didn't go in. Just dialed a number from memory. "Jennifer," said the voice on the other end, crisp, unshaken. "The founder's legal executor. Is it time?" "Yes," I said. "Schedule confirmation for Monday." "Nothing official yet, but they're circling." There was a pause. "Understood. Protocols will be ready." I hung up. Then opened my contacts again. This time I called someone I hoped I'd never need, Emily, head of HR compliance. The kind of woman who wore cardigans like armor and knew more about internal ethics violations than the general counsel ever would. She answered on the second ring. "Hey," I said, voice low. "Remember when we wrote that clause about non-consensual role reassignment?" "I do," she said carefully. "Why?" "Because it's not hypothetical anymore." I could hear her swallow. "Tell no one," I said. "Monday morning, just watch." "I always liked you," she whispered. "You were the only one who didn't pretend the house wasn't on fire." "It's about to be," I replied. "And I'm not grabbing a hose this time." I hung up and stared at the sky. Stars looked like they were holding their breath. Let them. Because Monday, everything breathes fire. Saturday morning, I drove to headquarters one last time. Not with a badge, not with a purpose anyone could see. Just to confirm the full erasure had gone live. The leadership page had been updated. My photo gone, my title erased. Even the quote beneath it, which once read "Build systems that outlive you," was replaced with a smarmy line from Thomas about modern synergy. Kept the formatting, just deleted the soul. My badge, once a green pass to every room in the building, blinked red when I tried to enter the side gate. Security gave me a polite shrug and a plastic smile. "Sorry, system must have reset. You're not in the directory." I didn't argue, I just walked away. By noon, Linda was hosting what she called a strategic celebration brunch, a grotesque fusion of mimosas, legacy talk, and thinly veiled triumphalism. She posted a boomerang on her private Instagram story. A slow-motion toast beside the founder's old leather chair, with the caption, "We've restored the family vision briefcase bottle kiss." They were smiling like they'd done something noble. Like burying the woman who kept the engine running through a pandemic, 3 restructures, and a hostile acquisition attempt was a sacred right. While they sipped blood orange champagne, I was in a coffee shop across town, same table I used to meet new hires at. Back when I still believed legacy was earned, not inherited. That's when I saw her, Madison, one of the smartest interns I ever had, back in 18. She once fixed a vendor crisis before lunch and cried in the bathroom because no one noticed. I noticed. She walked in with a nervous kind of energy, spotted me, then sat like she was breaking protocol just by existing in my vicinity. I don't have long, she whispered. I'm technically on probation for leaking internal memos, but I thought you should have this. She slid a small black USB across the table like it was radioactive. What is it? I asked. Recordings, she said. Internal call logs, strategy sessions. One from Thursday night, you should hear it. She stood, then hesitated. You were the only one who didn't treat me like I was temporary. Then she was gone. I waited until I got home to plug it in. Files were labeled with timestamps and shorthand codes. I went to the most recent one, 0411THLT strat:*P3. I hit play, Linda's voice first. Giddy, she's not going to fight this. She doesn't have the stomach, Thomas laughed. She's never been a fighter. That's why she was useful. Useful. I paused the clip, pressed my fingers to my temples. Not because I was angry, because I was done. They thought silence meant surrender. I was just conserving energy, building voltage. By evening, I had everything in place. I printed copies of the share redistribution draft. I attached the USB to the back of a written statement. And I compiled a master folder, black cover, sealed with a clip. I labeled it in simple, neat block letters. Continuity trigger will activation. I drove it to Hensley, Marks, and Reed myself. No courier. No email. Mr. Hensley met me in a side room. I handed it to him. He didn't ask a single question. He just said, you understand that when we open this on Monday, it cannot be undone. I nodded once, that's the idea. He placed it inside a fireproof satchel and walked it into a temperature-controlled room behind a steel door. When he came back, he looked at me for a long time. What should I tell them when they ask who authorized it? He finally asked. I stood. Tell them she did, I said, voice steady. Woman they erased. He smiled, not kindly. That won't narrow it down in this company. Then tell them the one who built it didn't need to raise her voice to own it. He opened the door for me. As I stepped out into the night, I could hear the party down the block, music, laughter, forks scraping porcelain. They were still celebrating. I hoped they danced. Because Monday, the lights come on. Monday morning arrived without thunder. No dramatic sunrise, no burning sky, just gray clouds and the kind of cold that wraps around your bones instead of your skin. I dressed deliberately, gray slacks, a neutral blouse, flats with silent soles. No jewelry, no war paint. I wanted to look like a question mark. The building at Hensley, Marks and Reed was quiet when I arrived at 7:55 a.m. The receptionist didn't ask who I was. She just nodded toward the hallway like she'd been briefed. Conference room C had a long mahogany table and one chair pulled out. A glass of water waited at the head. I sat. 5 minutes later, Mr. Hensley walked in. His tie was darker than usual. He said nothing. Simply nodded, then placed the black folder I had delivered on Saturday onto the table, its edges pristine. Then he reached into the side drawer of the cabinet behind him and withdrew another envelope, heavier, older, with the wax seal I recognized immediately. The founder's personal will. I didn't speak, neither did he. At 8:14 a.m., the door opened. Linda entered first, all pearl earrings and predator's calm. Thomas followed, tailored, smug, checking his phone. Behind them, 2 board members, the new general counsel, and a silent junior partner carrying a notepad like it was a shield. Good morning, Linda said brightly, taking the seat opposite mine. I assume this is about finalizing transfer confirmations. We're told there'd be a chance to witness the readings. She glanced toward Mr. Hensley like he was the help. Thomas grinned at me, hands in his pockets. Babe, this doesn't have to be dramatic. We can make this clean. I agree, I said softly. He tilted his head, confused by my stillness. Mr. Hensley cleared his throat. Before we proceed, let the record show this meeting was initiated under Continuity Trigger Protocol, as outlined in Exhibit J of the late founder Charles Aldridge's operational will. The room shifted. Linda's smile tightened. I'm sorry, exhibit what? Mr. Hensley opened the envelope. His fingers didn't tremble. He unfolded the papers, then read aloud. Clause 7G. Should internal action, overt or covert, result in the removal, reassignment, or obstruction of my named strategic successor from active operations, this clause shall activate immediately. Upon activation, said successor shall be granted controlling interest across all board decisions, voting shares, and executive authority. This override shall supersede all legacy planning, familial equity claims, and executive appointments made posthumously. He paused, looked around the room. That successor, he continued, is Jennifer Hale. Silence dropped like a trapdoor. Thomas's jaw twitched. Linda opened her mouth, then closed it. I didn't move. General counsel shifted in his seat. That clause that's not enforceable, not without confirmation of removal. She was placed on involuntary wellness leave, locked out of systems, reassigned without consent, and erased from leadership directories. Mr. Hensley replied without looking up. We have documentation, including timestamps and statements already submitted for review. But she wasn't fired, Linda hissed. Mr. Hensley smiled faintly. The clause says removal from strategic operations, not termination. Thomas leaned forward, palms flat. This is insane. She didn't even know this clause existed. How can she claim control if she wasn't even aware? I reached into my bag and pulled out the key. A small brass thing. It had sat in the back of my desk drawer for 6 years, ever since Aldridge gave it to me during an ops retreat and said, if I ever die and people start playing musical chairs with your work, use this. It opens something that will stop the music. I slid it across the table. Mr. Hensley took it, walked to the filing cabinet in the corner, opened a drawer I hadn't seen him use before. Inside, a leather-bound ledger. The original signed operations continuity document, founder's signature, witnessed, stamped. He placed it gently beside the will. Was activated the moment she was locked out, he said. The junior partner began writing furiously. Linda's voice cracked. You can't be serious. This was written before we adjusted the equity. Before Thomas assumed interim CEO duties, that's correct, Mr. Hensley said. And now all such adjustments are frozen pending ethics review, which is also now under Jennifer's authority. I let out a slow breath, not relief, not glee, just the feeling of gravity returning to its rightful axis. I looked at Thomas. He looked like a child who just realized the steering wheel in the amusement park car doesn't actually control the ride, and the ride had just begun. Thomas's laugh was the first sound to break the silence, and it came out wrong, too loud, too sharp, like a glass cracking under heat. You can't be serious, he said, eyes darting between me and Mr. Hensley. This is some technicality, right? Ceremonial. There's no real authority shift happening here. The general counsel didn't answer. He just leaned back in his chair like he was trying to disappear into the upholstery. Linda, ever the showman, tried to recover. Let's not overreact. Charles was brilliant, but this clause, it was outdated. Written when Jennifer was still on the rise, before we had a more experienced team in place. The equity restructuring is suspended, Mr. Hensley said, not raising his voice but making the room colder with each word. Effective immediately. Per Exhibit J, Section 9, all share reassignments made following strategic removal are frozen pending independent ethics review to be initiated by the named successor, Jennifer Hale. Thomas stood, as if height could restore control. This is ridiculous. That clause can't override board authority. We were acting in the best interest of the company. She never objected. She never fought. I reached into my leather folio and removed the final piece. It was a photo, a timestamped screenshot of my calendar, the morning I was locked out. 8:06 a.m. Every meeting gone. Access revoked. Admin override signed by the interim IT lead. Then I handed over a short affidavit, signed by the head of HR compliance, noting I had been placed on sabbatical without consent, that I had received no formal evaluation, no performance review, and that no written policy had ever defined a wellness leave as anything but voluntary. Mr. Hensley took the documents, read them silently, and then placed them beside the founder's signed ledger. According to the founder's explicit language, he said, this constitutes covert internal removal. The clause is not ceremonial. It was crafted in response to concerns the founder expressed directly to this office after a hospitalization 3 years ago. Linda paled. Thomas opened his mouth to speak, but what came out wasn't a word. It was a dry sound, a failure of air. I tapped the table gently. There's more. I reached back into my folio and retrieved the USB drive. The one Madison gave me. This contains internal recordings, I said. Not taken by me. Submitted by a third party. I slid it forward. In them, both Linda and Thomas refer to me as a placeholder. There's a direct quote, she's never been a fighter, that's why she was useful. Mr. Hensley picked up the drive and inserted it into the laptop at the corner of the table. A few seconds later, audio filled the room. Linda's voice, bright and clear, she'll go quietly, she always does. Thomas, laughing, she doesn't have the stomach. She built the machine, but she never owned it. General counsel flinched. Linda leaned forward, her voice tight. That was off the record. Not anymore, I replied. Mr. Hensley closed the laptop and looked down the table. Effective as of this morning, he said, Jennifer Hale holds controlling interest and operational authority. Any efforts to obstruct that authority may constitute fraud under current statutes. The board has been notified and will convene under her direction this afternoon. Thomas dropped back into his seat. Linda sat frozen, one hand still resting on the arm of her chair like she couldn't decide whether to stand or vanish. I looked at both of them. You assumed quiet meant powerless, I said. That silence was submission. But it was strategy. Mr. Hensley turned to me. Would you like to adjourn? I nodded. Yes, it's time to prepare for the transition. I stood slowly, calmly, collected my documents, pocketed the key. As I reached the door, Linda's voice, trembling now, called out, "Charles never intended this." I turned back, met her eyes. "No," I said. "He intended to protect what he built from the people who thought they were entitled to it just because they shared his last name." Then I walked out, every step quiet, every step mine. The boardroom was packed by 1 p.m. They didn't call it an emergency meeting. They called it a clarification session, as if the entire power structure of the company hadn't just detonated before their very eyes. I sat at the head of the table this time, not metaphorically, literally. The seat they used to joke was reserved for ghosts and founders now had my nameplate in front of it. No jokes now. Linda was first to speak, of course. This is not what Charles wanted," she snapped, shaking papers that weren't hers to shake. "This clause is outdated. We were protecting his legacy. Was vulnerable near the end. Paranoid, sick." Thomas nodded, eyes burning red with the frustration of a man who just realized charisma can't override legal documentation. "It was meant for outside threats," he added. "You're not an outsider, you're family." I stared at him. "Exactly," I said. "That's what made me the perfect target." I tapped the table. Mr. Hensley plugged the USB into the boardroom screen. "This isn't about paranoia," I continued. "This is about what you did when you thought I wouldn't push back." The first clip played, Linda's voice. "Jennifer's loyal, but she's not leadership. We keep her close, let her build, and when Charles goes, we transition smoothly. Thomas, she won't fight it. She's too inward. She'll call it alignment and walk away." Another voice, one of the board members, chiming in. "As long as we label it wellness or fatigue, we can keep it clean on the HR front. No paper trail." Silence. The second clip. Thomas again, quieter, on what sounded like a late-night call. "The founder's clause? Sure, technically it exists, but unless she digs, it's useless. Besides, it would only trigger if she were removed." He laughed. "I didn't fire her. I just locked her out." The screen went dark. I didn't move. Across the table, the CFO leaned back in his chair like he was trying to fuse with it. The head of legal pinched the bridge of her nose. Then Carolyn, Founder's longtime assistant, stood from her seat near the wall. She hadn't said a word all day. No one even realized she was invited. "I was there," she said, voice even. "Charles had the clause rewritten after his first heart scare. He said they'll come for her, not because she's weak, but because she's necessary. And when they do, they'll think they're smart enough to get away with it." She placed a notarized memo on the table, dated 6 months before his death. "Signed and sealed. I filed it under his direct orders," she said. He named her successor. Not to carry the torch, to guard the damn flame. Linda looked like she might throw up. Thomas rubbed his forehead like he was trying to push the moment back into his skull. I leaned forward, cold, final. Every strategy document I ever built had a contingency plan. So did Charles. He knew exactly what you'd try to do, and he knew you'd do it as a family. That's why he built the lock, gave me the key. I turned to the board. Effective immediately, I said, the role of lead strategist will be reassigned. I've selected someone who hasn't played politics, who hasn't whispered about my stability behind closed doors, who hasn't tampered with vote records or reassigned shares under the guise of alignment. I nodded to the door. It opened. Madison walked in. She looked terrified, but she didn't hesitate. Linda scoffed. "Her? A former intern?" I said, the only one who still believed this company was about work, not inheritance. A beat passed. No one objected. Then I turned to the board members, some of whom had sat silent for weeks as my erasure unfolded. "The position of board chair is also no longer tenable under the current ethical conflict," I said. "I'll be appointing a temporary chair until the ethics review is complete. The new chair, Carolyn, because ghosts don't forget who left the lights on." Passed. No objections, not one. Thomas stood up, voice cracking. "We weren't trying to destroy it, Jen. We were protecting it. You weren't built for the top. You were the gears. You weren't the engine." I stood too. "I was the architect," I said, "and now I'm the fire marshal." Then I reached for the gavel, and I ended the meeting. The boardroom had never been this quiet, not during acquisitions, not during COVID, not even the day we found out Charles had passed. That silence had been grief. This one was something else, thicker, tighter, the kind of silence that only arrives when power changes hands and everyone in the room knows it's not coming back. I stepped inside at 2 p.m. sharp. No folder, no speech. Just the founder's watch on my wrist, black leather strap, cracked near the buckle, silver face worn dull around the edges. No one had seen it in months. No one knew it was mine. Except Charles. Gave it to me in a manila envelope labeled Operational Asset Transfer during one of our last retreats. Said, "If you ever have to wear this to a meeting, make sure they see it before they speak." I made sure. I stood at the head of the table. The seat already pulled out. Every eye watched me. Thomas was near the end, shoulders squared like he still thought he could bluff his way into legacy. Linda sat rigid, expression somewhere between courtroom defiance and cocktail hour denial. The rest of the board, quiet, waiting, some ashamed, some alert, all unsure. I placed both hands on the back of the chair. Effective immediately, I said, calm and clean, all decisions flow through me. No response, not even breath. Thomas opened his mouth, but I raised a single finger. Don't, I said. Just don't. Behind me, the doors opened. 2 plainclothes security officers stepped in, hired weeks ago. Not corporate, private, quiet men with good posture and clipped earpieces. They didn't make a show of it, no handcuffs, no scene. Just walked to Thomas and Linda and said softly, "You'll need to come with us. HR will coordinate your exit interviews and belongings." Linda stood like someone had cut her strings. Thomas hesitated, one last look, one last gamble, some speech probably rehearsed in the mirror. But he saw the watch. And he followed. Door closed behind them. Still no one spoke. I sat, then looked slowly around the table, making eye contact with each person who had been in the room when my name was scrubbed from the site, when my access was revoked, when a brunch was thrown over my career's still warm body. I let the silence speak. Let it weigh what it needed to. Then I cleared my throat. You let the wrong people speak for the company, I said. I won't make that mistake. That was it. No applause, no nods, just a slow exhale, not from me, from the room. Like something had finally broken free, something old and foul and unspoken. I checked the watch. 2:06 p.m. Right on time. Appreciate you sticking around, you wise old rebels. Smash that subscribe button, or this fossil might just cause another epic fiasco.